So what's the deal with mic preamps? Are they really that important? And how much of a difference do hardware preamps and preamp emulations make in electronic music productions? Today, we answer all those questions and more, coming right up. Hi, I'm Les Vegas, recording artist, music producer, and mixing engineer from Los Angeles, California. On this channel, I talk about all the latest pro audio hardware and software and provide tips and tricks on recording and mixing music at home. We also take a look at how some of the biggest chart-topping hits are made by producing nearly identical remakes 100% in the box. So if you're new here, please consider subscribing. And at any point in the video, check out the links to all the different gear, software, and other things we talk about in this video in the description below. Today, we're talking about if preamps are just as valuable when used on line-level sources like synths, samplers, and drum machines as they are for mic sounds. There are a ton of videos online comparing preamps on vocals and mic'd instruments like acoustic guitars, drum kits, and amps, for example, but this video is intended for electronic music producers who are wondering if purchasing a pair of industry-standard preamps to record their hardware instruments will really make much of a difference compared to the internal preamps on their audio interfaces. We'll do this by shooting out the hardware Unison preamps on the UA Apollo against the Unison-enabled Neve 1073 and API preamp emulations. By comparing the sound of the hardware preamps on the Apollo with the Unison preamp emulations, I'm hoping it will give you a good idea of the sound you can expect from the hardware equivalents. And if you feel the differences in sound will be worth spending $1,000 or more on the actual hardware, a few $100s on the Unison-enabled plugins, or just using the preamps that are built into your audio interface. For those of you who aren't familiar with Unison preamps by Universal Audio, let me give you a quick overview as to what they are, how they work, and how they make UA Apollo interfaces different from all other audio interfaces on the market today. When it comes to Apollo interfaces, it's all about the Unison preamps. Otherwise, without them, there are definitely audio interfaces that sound just as good for a lot less money. Unison technology is an audio processing breakthrough that starts right at the source, the input stage, allowing UA audio interface mic preamps to sound and behave like the world's most sought-after tube and solid-state designs. By capturing the most important impedance and gain stage sweet spots, along with component-level circuit behaviors, Unison gives UA interfaces the tone and feel of legendary mic preamps from UA, API, Neve, SSL, Manley, and more. When plugging into the instrument input on the front of UA Apollo interfaces, Unison technology also emulates the input impedance of guitar and bass amps by Fender, Marshall, Ampeg, and more. This is crucial to capturing the signature tones from these legendary amps. Unison is activated by inserting any Unison-enabled UAD plugin into the special Unison insert slot in the UA console software. You just click on a Unison insert and select the Unison-enabled plugin you want to use. Next, make sure the record button is enabled in the UA console software and disable input monitoring on your track you're recording on in your DAW. This allows you to hear what you're recording with zero noticeable latency. When the record button is enabled in the UA console software, the processing gets recorded in real time. This means you can't remove the processing after it was done, and the processing has been committed. For those of you with commitment issues, you can just enable monitor mode and none of the processing will be recorded. However, it should be said that most experienced recording engineers and producers prefer dialing in the sound they want from their preamps and permanently capturing their recordings this way. What's cool about working this way is that when you were recording, just how you heard it will be exactly how it was captured. If you add the Unison preamps to a track after the fact, there will be subtle differences in how the preamps react to the audio each time the track is played back as a result of the physical modeling process of the emulations. Now, before we dive in and have a listen, let's talk really quickly about what mic preamps give us, how they shape the sound of our sources, and how they can really enhance our productions. Preamps are a crucial part of the recording chain. In terms of signal processing, preamps produce the biggest change in color to a sound other than changing the musician, instrument, or microphone. A good mic preamp will reveal the texture of your sound more from mic to line than in any other stage of the recording process. When recording at conservative levels, it can be difficult to hear substantial differences between preamps. So let's talk about how we can reveal the differences and things to listen for. When you turn up the input of a preamp, you're sending it through more harmonic stages so that you're enhancing their harmonics, that is, the overtone frequencies that surround the fundamental frequency of what you're recording. So if we really want to hear the distinct colors of a particular preamp, we can crank up the input to exaggerate the characteristics. This is exactly how I use preamps and how I recorded all the instruments in this video. When comparing the preamps, listen for a difference in the low end and how it responds to the transients. That is, how much clarity is there in the top end of the initial attack on each instrument. Also, listen for differences in the amount and quality of distortion that each preamp produces when we drive the input stage. One might be cleaner and more transparent, where others might sound more colored and saturated. To give you an idea of the difference in sound and typical uses for the Neve 1073 and API preamps, generally speaking, top engineers and producers typically say Neves have a warmer, fatter, more retro rock and roll sound, and APIs have a much faster and more aggressive mid-range forward type of sound. The Neve may be a thicker, richer distortion, while the API may be a bit more aggressive, grittier kind of distortion. Producer Joel Hamilton explains them this way. In some ways, the actual preamps and Neves and APIs aren't so very different, but the EQ sections really diverge. The frequency points that are chosen to accentuate the way they boost or cut. The APIs are like a solid, faster version of the same kind of muscle as the Neve. They make me think of California rock rather than British rock like the Neve. If Neve is the heavyweight, the API is just below that in weight class, but that just means it's a little leaner and more nimble. But with that mid-forward tone, it can still really throw a punch. Young Guru, perhaps best known for Jay-Z's engineer of choice, said he often runs synth and sound samples through a Neve 1073 when he wants to give them more presence and body. He'll turn the input of the preamp way up and bring the output down to keep the levels correct. This gives the sound a lot of presence and character. Specifically for drum samples, he says he's more likely to use an API and take advantage of the multiple outputs on an MPC to dial in individual preamp sounds on kick, snare, hats, and everything else. All right, so now that we've went over the importance of mic preamps, what each may be best suited for, and how to hear the differences between them, let's have a listen. For this shootout, I recorded 7 of my favorite little hardware synthesizers, samplers, and drum machines. The Korg microKORG XL+, Korg Monologue, Akai MPC Touch, Korg Vocal Sample, Roland TR-08, Roland TR-8S, and my very first keyboard and musical instrument, a 1987 Yamaha VSS-30 with built-in 8-bit voice sampler. I try to capture a wide range of sounds from fat synth basses and leads to keys, 808s, full drum patterns, and 8-bit vocal samples so you can hear how each preamp responds to different sound sources. All tracks were precisely level matched using the extremely accurate 64-bit LUFS meter in levels. This ensures that any differences you hear are not due to one track being louder than the other. Each track was composed in MIDI first and played back precisely the same way every time, so there is absolutely zero difference in the dynamics of each performance. Any differences you hear will be a direct result of the hardware preamp or emulations. First, we'll listen to the built-in Unison preamps on the Apollo audio interface, followed by the 1073 and API preamp emulations. Then, we'll go back to the preamps on the audio interface so you can hear the difference between the API preamp emulation and the hardware preamps back to back. As I mentioned, the differences in the sound of preamps, both hardware and plug-in emulations, can be subtle, especially to new or untrained ears. So, if you're listening on laptop speakers or inexpensive earbuds, try listening again on a pair of studio monitors or headphones so you can really hear the differences.
yo, 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 yo.
So today, I touched on the importance of mic preamps in the recording process and a few reasons you should consider buying external hardware preamps or tracking with Apollo Unison preamp emulation plugins. If you'd like me to shoot out other hardware or Unison mic preamps or have any questions on anything mentioned in the video, just let me know. All right, so somebody get the conversation started. Could you hear a significant difference in the sound of the preamps? Do you think it's worth spending the money on hardware preamps or premium plugin emulations? Let me know in the comments below. And remember, some of the top producers and artists in the world tune into videos just like this one. So definitely connect with other musicians and producers down there.